Welcome. I'm Anthony Saccaro, founder and president of Providence Financial and Insurance Services. I'm also host of the Providence Financial Retirement Show, which airs every Saturday on AM 870 KRL Lay the Answer. And welcome to our quarterly client, friends, and family webinar in which I'm going to answer your questions. So this is going to be a Q&A. The purpose of this is for me to answer your questions and really just to continue staying in touch with you, our valued clients, and also give those of you that have friends and family who you think we might be able to help the opportunity to plug in and in just a very non-threatening environment, listen to some of our viewpoints, some of our philosophies, and decide if they think we can help them as much as maybe you think that we can help them. So if you are a client of ours, thank you for your business. Thank you for your trust. You know that we don't take it lightly. And we're going to be as long as we need on this webinar because I have a lot of questions. I think I have 6 or 8 questions, and this is not canned. I don't have a presentation. I'm going to answer your questions. Now, that doesn't mean I didn't do any research. Of course, I want to make sure that we can delve deep into answering some of your questions as well, too. And some of your questions we might spend a little more time on than others, but we'll do that as necessary. We'll see how this goes. So I would expect maybe 30 to 60 minutes, depending on how much I gab. And for those of you that know me well, you know that I can gab. So what are some of these questions about? Well, we've got questions about the Trump tax cuts. We've got questions about investing for income to help someone grow their portfolio. We've got questions about Social Security benefits being cut. We've got questions about buying home, whether it's a good time to buy a home. We've got a question about Bidenomics and question about CDs and inflation. And we had several questions about a recession. So that's where we're going to start. Let me give you my thoughts as far as whether we're going to have a recession, what that looks like, because I think this is going to answer several of the questions that you guys sent in about that very topic, recession. Now, I did a Yahoo TV interview last week. And the first thing I said is we're not out of the woods yet. There's a lot of conversation out there about, are we going to have a recession? 6 and 8 months ago, it was not whether we were going to have a recession. It was, we're going to have a recession. But, the question is how deep and how short, or how long and how shallow, or the other way around. But those were the questions. It was really kind of a preconceived notion that we were going to have a recession. And now the conversation that you're hearing is that we might just avert a recession altogether. They've talked about hard landing. They've talked about soft landing. Now what you start hearing is, what about no landing? And when I did this Yahoo interview, the first thing I said is we're not out of the woods yet. And apparently that resonated because that made the front page of Yahoo, where they quoted me and said, we're not out of the woods yet. And that's what you need to be important. That's what you need to be aware of. We're not out of the woods yet. The one thing that is still bothersome to me with regards to whether we're going to have a recession, the one telltale sign is the inverted yield curve. So that's something you need to know a little bit about, the inverted yield curve. Now, it is true that a lot of the economic indicators are softening. The inflation rates come down, right? The housing market is softened a little bit. The Federal Reserve has softened their aggressive raising of interest rates. The labor market has softened, but it's the labor market that everything is lynched on. That's the linchpin, if you will, about whether or not we're going to have a recession. It's all about the labor market. That's the one thing that you want to watch. If the labor market is tight, if there's a lot of workers out there and not a lot of jobs available. Right now, there's 1.7 worker for every job that is available. Then people have the ability to spend money. And if you raise rates, they're still going to spend money. And it's going to be this constant battle. It is the labor market that you have to watch. Most of the times when we go into a recession, we have a high unemployment. Right now, the unemployment rate is still, I think it's 3.5 or 3.6%, but still very, very almost at record low levels. That number has to get up. A lot of economists and professionals think it's got to get into the 6 or 7 range. I've said on TV that I think it's probably get closer to 7 before we actually have any type of meaningful drop in the employment market, which is what the entire recession is going to be based off. The labor market is the most important criteria when we talk about whether we're going to have a recession or not. That has to soften a lot more. It has softened. Again, I mentioned this 1.7 jobs available per worker. 6 months ago, it was like 1.9 jobs available per worker. So it's come down a little, but ever so slightly. But what about this inverted yield curve? Well, what is an inverted yield curve? For those of you that might be wondering, an inverted yield curve, a healthy yield curve basically says that when you look at the 10-year treasury, the farther out you go, the more interest you're going to earn. So it goes like this. It's an upward sloping yield curve. In other words, if you're going to invest in a 30-year treasury, you're going to make more than if you invested in a 10-year treasury. You're going to make more interest in a 10-year treasury than if you invested in a 1-year treasury. And you'll make more in a 1-year treasury than if you invested in a 3 or 6 month treasury. So the farther out you go, that yield curve slopes up. And that makes sense. That's healthy. That's what we're used to. The longer you commit your money, the more you're going to get paid. That's what a healthy yield curve is. Well, what is an inverted yield curve? Well, kind of like the name sounds, it doesn't go like this. It goes like this. So it looks like a rainbow. An inverted yield curve looks like a rainbow. So what that means then is that means that you actually make more interest on the short run than you do by committing your money to the long run. So think about it this way. Matter of fact, let me give you the numbers as I have them here. As of yesterday, and probably the same numbers today, the 2-year treasury was at 4.96. You could lock your money up in the safest investment known to mankind, a treasury bill, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government, and you could earn 4.96% for 2 years, guaranteed, no questions. Okay. Or you could lock your money up for 10 years and earn 4.2%. So your call, 4.96, call it 5. Okay, 5% for 2 years or 4.2% for 10 years. What would you do? Well, of course, you're all thinking, well, why on earth would I lock my money up for 10 years for 4.2% if I could get 5% for 2 years? My money's more liquid in 2 years. I can do with it what I want, and I get greater rate of return. So that just doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? Well, let me ask you, why would you do that? Well, here's the answer. The reason that you would consider doing that is because you believe that in 2 years, when your bond that you're getting 5% on matures, you believe that at that time, you're not even going to be able to get 4.2% at that point. So better to lock your money up now for 4.2%. So at least you'll get 4.2% for the entire 10 years so that when your bond matures at the end of 2 years, you don't have to worry about rates having gone through the floor, and you don't have to worry about reinvesting your dollar. An inverted yield curve tells us that people are worried about interest rates going down. That's what it tells us. So if we think that rates are going to go down, then you very well may want to lock up your money at a higher rate of return for 10 years at 4.2%, knowing that, or having a gut feel that in 2 years when your treasury bond matures, you won't even be able to get 4.2 at that point. That's what an inverted yield curve is. And the bond market is smarter than the stock market. The bond market dwarfs the stock market. A lot of people don't know that. And they always say that the bond market's smarter than the stock market. And I don't know if you've heard that before, but let me tell you why that is. You actually have to know something and have some financial acumen in order to invest in bonds. You can make a lot of money in bonds. We have some clients that are bond traders. They've done extremely well, but you have to know what you're doing. But in the stock market, you don't. What do I mean? Well, think about mutual funds. Imagine how many hundreds of billions or maybe trillions of dollars are in 401ks, in stocks, with people that are working that have no clue what they're doing. You know how hard it is to choose a mutual fund? Checkbox. You just check mark a box. And that's what most people have done. And think about you, right? 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you checked a box and there you are. You've had your mutual funds. That's how hard it is to buy the stocks. And inside the mutual funds are a bunch of stocks. So to buy stocks, you just check a box. To buy bonds, you actually have to have some financial acumen. So the bond market's smarter than the stock market. It's just saying that is very true. And what the bond market is telling us is that they think interest rates are going to go down. So the people who are investing long term are giving up that short term rate for the purpose of that locking in that long term rate, because they believe that in the short run, yes, you might make 5% for 2 years, but when that drops, you won't even be able to get maybe 1% or 2% in 2 years. So we'd rather get 4.2% now for 10 years than 5% for only 2 years. That's what an inverted yield curve does. So hopefully that gives you some insight. But what about our question? What about the recession and yield curve? Well, here's the interesting thing. An inverted yield curve has preceded the last 7 U.S. recessions. It's a very good indicator of U.S. recessions. And so I wanted to go back. I did a little research and I wanted to go back and get you some dates so you can kind of see where we are as far as this inverted yield curve. So let me go back. If you go back to the 1980 to 82 recession, the yield curve inverted in February of 1978. And the recession began in January of 1980. So it was 23 months from the inversion to the beginning of the recession. Now, where are we at now? Right now, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe that the inversion started, it was May or June of 2022. So it's been a year and 3 months, and maybe it was a few months longer than that, but it's been, I believe it's been a little less than a year and a half. That's when our inverted. So we've been inverted for about a year and a half at this point. So before the 1980 to 82 recession, it had been inverted for almost 2 years. 1990 to 91 recession, the yield curve inverted in May of 89. The recession began in July of 1990. So that was a 14-month inversion. We had the dot-com crash, right? Those of you remember that well. Some of you, 2000 to 2001 dot-com bubble crash. The yield curve inverted February of 2000, and the recession began in March of 2001. That was a 13-month inversion. So it inverted for 13 months. Then we had the global financial crisis, which went from 2007 to 2009. That yield curve inverted in December of 2005. And the recession began in December 2007. That was a full 2 years before the financial crisis occurred. And then we had the COVID recession. Well, interestingly enough, the yield curve there inverted briefly in March of 2019. And then the recession that was triggered by COVID came around in 2020. Now, I don't think that the inverted yield curve in March of 2019 knew that COVID was going to happen. So I think there was a little bit more luck and coincidence at that point. But what about now? Now we've been inverted. That yield curve's been inverted for a year and a half at most. And I believe it's telling something to us about the market. I don't believe we are out of the woods yet. I think you have to be very careful at this point. And if you know me, you know that we have a couple core values. One core value is I want to plan for worst case scenario. I don't want your retirement to be dependent on everything going well. If you can plan for worst case scenario, then and you can live with worst case scenario, then you can live with anything better than that. The reality is that you have to plan for worst case scenario. The other core value is that I don't want your retirement goals and dreams and plans and the thing you want to do and spending time with the kids and traveling, or whether you can retire or not. If you're not retired yet, I don't want all of that to depend on things going well. Do you want to travel only when the stock market does well? Do you want to travel or see your grandkids or give to charity only when things are going your direction? Of course not. You want to do that anyway. And I talk to people all the time that are planning on retiring in the next couple of years, but they're still invested heavily in growth. And I think they're taking a huge, huge risk. So we had a question about that. We're going to talk a little more about that later. But the fact is that we're not out of the woods yet. And I think we could have a recession. The inverted yield curve tells us that we could have a recession. And market history tells us that we could have a recession. there are long periods of time where the market does really well, and those long periods of time are followed by long periods of time where the market does really poorly. And a lot of times the market gets a fresh new high or gets close to its high before it has a crash. So we don't know. I just don't want your future plans to be affected if things go against you. But the bond market's telling us that we have a recession ahead. And I would agree with that. Now, is it possible that we don't? Of course. Anything's possible. When it comes to the market, they call them securities. Securities are very insecure. We don't know for sure what's going to happen. But I think odds are greater than not that we have a recession probably not this year, probably sometime in 2024. And that seems to be what the inverted yield curve is telling us as well. So a little bit about recession. I think that's going to answer a few questions that I got. But let's jump into some of our other questions. And I think that a conversation up to this point as a backdrop is going to help us with some of these other questions as well, too. So first question. We kind of hit on this. Curious about being able to get liquid cash in the event of a recession. Are short-term bank CDs a good investment? Well, we kind of talked about that. We talked about the 2-year treasury and the fact that in 2 years, the reason we have an inverted yield curve is that in 2 years, investors don't even think that they might be able to get the 4.2 that you can get for going out 10 years now. So if you decide to invest in a 1 or 2 year CD and rates go through the floor and you get a 2-year CD for say 5%, I think that's what you can get for today, and rates go through the floor, then when your CD matures, you might not be able to get one at that point. We might be in a recession. Unemployment rate might be through the roof in 2 years. The federal funds rate might have been dropped and the employment rate number down. And we could be in a full-blown recession at that point. And now your CD matures and you've been smiling for 2 years, but now what are you going to do? Well, what you need to know is that, as fixed income specialists at Providence Financial, that we can get our target right now after fees is 5 to 6% a year in very conservative investments, and we can lock that money up for somewhere in the range of 10 years. So instead of getting 5% for 2 years, why not focus on getting 5% for 10 years? And that's the difference. So if you have short-term money, you want to buy a home in a couple of years and you're going to need that money, 100% CD, 1 year, 2 year, lock it up, take your 5% and run, because when it matures, you're going to need the money. But if this is a long-term savings plan and you're going to put it into a short-term strategy, you could be shooting yourself in the foot. That's the challenge. I did a whole a podcast on this, by the way. I don't have the date in front of me, but for those of you that listen to our podcast, I've gotten a lot of compliments from you. For those of you that have not listened to our podcast, it's not complicated. Sometimes people say, well, podcast, how do I listen to that? I had someone in the office the other day that actually went to his phone and showed him and pulled it up, and he was like, that's it? So there's a podcast player on your phone. You can search for the Providence Financial Retirement Show. You just search for it and it comes up. Or if you don't want to do that, we have a website. You can listen to our podcast on our website, providencefinancialpodcast.com, providencefinancialpodcast.com, and you can listen to any of our episodes. I think we're approaching 300 episodes, all of them related to retirement. I did one just on short-term CDs within the last 2 months. You'll be able to search it. You'll be able to see it. So hopefully, though, I answered the question in that podcast. I get into a little more detail. I think I quoted some more stats than I'll be able to here because I don't have the numbers in front of me. Number 2 question, will Social Security benefits be cut in 2024? Well, the question says 2024. I think you meant 2034 because that's the date that the actual Social Security Social Security has been slated to be cut. 2034. And the answer is, I don't believe so. When you get your statements, by the way, what you're going to notice is that the worst case scenario is that, and when you study it, when you look at it, the worst case scenario across the board, if nothing changes, is that in 2034, what winds up happening is everyone who's getting Social Security gets a 21% pay cut. Now, when you watch the media out there, that's not quite what they say. They say things like you're going to lose your Social Security, no one's going to get it anymore. That's not true. The worst case scenario is a 21% pay cut. The challenge is this is more of a political problem than it is a mathematical problem, and it's more politics. Now, when do politicians like to solve problems? 10 years out, like we are now, or maybe the last week of December of 2034? You all know the answer, right? We're not going to have a solution to this until whoever's president is, president on December 15th of, 2034, 2033, when they're supposed to run out. That's who's going to wind up solving that issue. But what you have to know is that there's a lot of ways to solve it ahead of time. Social Security came out in 1935. You know what the average life expectancy was when Social Security in 1935? It was like 58 years old. I mean, life expectancy has grown and grown and grown. It was young, like 58 years old. Social Security was designed to be gotten at 65. You weren't even supposed to live to get Social Security. And in the early stages, there were 35 people that were paying in for every recipient of Social Security. Now that ratio is, I believe it's 3-1. So no wonder. And so it's people are living longer. And there are some things that Social Security can do to combat that. Let me give you some things that they can do to combat that. First of all, they can adjust payroll taxes. Right now, there's a certain amount. I believe Social Security is 7.5% for the employer and 7.5% for the employee. So I believe it's 15%. That's your FICA tax that you see. They could raise that, right? And that would give them additional income. They could raise the taxable earnings cap. So right now, the earnings cap, I believe, is around $160,000, meaning if you make more than $160,000, only the first $160,000 is subject to that FICA tax. They can raise that, and that would give them more revenue. They could increase the retirement age. Well, we've already seen that, right? The max retirement age now is 67, but you can wait till 70. They can raise that. Something they can do. They can means test benefits. They've done that for lots of other things, right? Social Security, if you make too much, you pay tax. Medicare Part B, the more you make, the more you pay. Medical thresholds. There's a 7.5% medical deduction threshold on the tax return that you only get a deduct above 7.5% of your income. So the higher you make, the less you get a deduct. So what about for Social Security? What if they say, that you make a certain amount, now you get less? Well, they can do that for sure. I'm not saying that you would like all this stuff, by the way. I'm just telling you what they can do. Don't shoot the messenger, but I see them doing this down the road, or a combination of these things. And they can diversify investments. Right now, Social Security Fund is invested all in U.S. Treasuries. And there's been some conversation about them investing in other things, corporate bonds, or other things as well. So all of that would essentially kick that. Well, all of that, it wouldn't even kick the can down the road. That's what I was going to say. All of that would essentially solve the Social Security problem, or any combination. So the answer is, I'm not worried about Social Security running out. If we ever got to a point where we couldn't support our citizens, it wouldn't be good. It would just be ugly all the way around. Our credit would go through the floor. We already had another credit decrease. I think it was Fitch that just lowered our credit recently as well too. So bottom line is not concerned. It's a political motivator, not anything mathematical. A lot of ways to solve that problem, but great question. So number 3, this is a pretty easy question, kind of random. Will Schwab allow for linked accounts like TD Ameritrade? This allows for one login to view all of our joint accounts. So let's back up for a second, that those of you might not be familiar. I'm going to, for friends that are here, people that are not clients, you may not be familiar with this. If you're a client of ours, you probably have gotten a lot of notices recently. But 3 years ago or so, Charles Schwab bought TD Ameritrade. And now it's all coming to fruition, to where what's going to happen is this Friday, as a financial firm, we are no longer going to be able to open accounts for new clients. For you, our existing clients, we're going to be able to have full service capabilities. If you need money out of your accounts, none of that changes. You can always get the money out of your accounts. We can always make changes on your accounts, but we're not going to be able to open up new accounts for new clients starting as of 4:00 Eastern this Friday. I think that's 1:00 our time. There's going to be about a 2-week blackout. That blackout for us is going to go until September 5th. That's the day after Labor Day. Now, for you, what you need to know is that you're going to have a blackout period that's going to start the Friday before Labor Day, which I'm guessing is the 1st. I think it's September 1st. You should have all got notices that are going to tell you exactly what you need to do. But September 1st, they're going to shut down TD Ameritrade. They're going to work 24 hours, a whole team of people. They're going to convert everyone over to Schwab, and you're going to wake up on September 5th, the day after Labor Day, and now you are going to have your accounts are going to be at Charles Schwab. So you've all received letters. I've received letters from my personal accounts, my business accounts. You've all received letters. Your letters include your account number. Your letters include the ability to go on to Charles Schwab and log in and create your account. You don't need to wait until September 5th to do that. You can go create a username and log in right now. And I've been told, and I haven't seen it, I've delegated this task to staff members to do this, but I've been told it's easy. It's gone the way we want it to go. It's very clean. I've actually been told the new site's better. So I'm actually excited. But the fact is that on September 5th, you're going to wake up and you're going to have Charles Schwab. So don't wait to create an account. Go create an account. And yes, some of the more common questions we get, all of your standing order instructions are going to carry over. So if you've been getting that monthly paycheck, you're going to keep getting it. You don't need to contact us. Everything from the old will transfer over to the new as well. The only thing you need to do is create a new login and you'll have access to everything as well there too. So, and yes, as the question asks, one login for all of your household accounts, just like you have now. So great question. Let's move on, get into more substantial, but thank you for bringing me that to the Schwab question, because a lot of you probably were wondering about that as well too. You know, when two multi-trillion-dollar firms merge, it usually doesn't go smooth, and I was worried about this 3 years ago. It's actually gone extremely smooth on our end. They've kept in touch with us. They've done webinars with us, so it's gone really well. And from what I've heard from you, it's been smooth on your end as well too, because there's not a lot that's happened, but we have no reason to think it's not going to be smooth from here on out. Next question. Do you think the Trump tax cuts will be extended? And then part B is, should I put more money into Roth 401k and pay more taxes now while the Trump tax cuts are still in place? Yes. So do I think they will be extended? No, I don't. And let's talk about what they are first. I'm going to come back and extrapolate on that. So what did the Trump tax cuts do? Well, they lowered the tax brackets across the board for individuals and corporations, right? The corporate tax was 35%. It lowered down to 21%. That made corporations more competitive. That's a pretty big cut. The personal income tax returns, they lowered across the board. The 15% now is the 12%. The 25% is now the 22%. The 31% is now the 28%. So it gave people more money. It also increased the standard deduction. It made it very high. So if you're 65 and you're married and you're filing joint, you have a standard deduction of $27,000 actually. So it's a high standard deduction. You don't pay any tax at all in the first $27,000 of income. That's, I believe, more than double of what it was before. So that increases the amount that you can make and lowers your income. So that's what essentially it did. What else did it do here? It eliminated, one of the negatives is that it actually eliminated personal exemptions. And in California, where most of us live, one of the negatives is that it put a limit on the amount of state taxes and local taxes that we could deduct, which in the higher income tax states as we are, that actually hurt us a little bit. So the Trump tax cuts in California, because of that, a lot of people wound up paying a little bit more tax. But in other states, especially states with no tax like Florida and Arizona, I believe Arizona, the fact is that it cut most people's personal income tax. That's what it did. So why do I think that they're not going to get extended? Well, first of all, the Biden administration, does the Biden administration want to cut tax or do they want to raise tax? We know that. They want to raise tax. They've told us that, right? They want to tax the wealthy, make sure the rich pay their fair share. That's what they want to do. So when the Trump tax cuts expire, and by the way, when they went into effect 10 years ago, I believe, when they went into effect, the fact is that they were set to sunset in 2025 and revert back to what they were before. This is not the first time that's happened. Ronald Reagan had some plans in place. I think Bill Clinton had some plans in place that you put these taxes, and part of the reason why you can get it through Congress and Senate or the House and Senate is because you put these sunsets. They're going to sunset and eventually go away. That's what happened. The Trump tax plan is going to sunset in 2025, revert to its old level, plus inflation. There's going to be some inflation hedge there as well, too. So the Biden administration is chomping at the bit. They want taxes to be higher than they are. But because we have a split Senate, the House, the Republicans control the House, right? But we have a split Senate. Because we have a split Senate, tax increases have to go through the Senate. Because we have a Republican House and a split Senate, chances are Biden's not going to get any tax increases through. That's why they haven't even tried. So in 2026, when these increases, or when the Trump tax cuts expire, they're going to be more than happy to let them expire. So we're going to have to see what happens in the presidential election, who's going to be president, and so on. But no, I don't see them being extended. So what's part B of this question? Should I pay more money into Roth 401k and pay more taxes now while Trump tax cuts are still available? The answer is, if it makes sense for you, yes. Roth 401ks, Roth IRAs don't make sense for everybody. Just a brief, and I'm going to answer the question thoroughly. And I think in order to answer the question thoroughly, you need to understand a little bit about IRAs and Roth IRAs. But we're not going to do a Roth IRA webinar on this, or an IRA webinar. I actually do webinars for an entire hour on required minimum distributions, not Roths, not IRAs, not 401ks, but just one component of those that are required minimum distributions. We talk an hour for, or just about, required minimum distributions. That's how complicated it could be. But in a nutshell, you have pre-tax plans and you have post-tax plans. A pre-tax plan would be like your traditional 401k, your traditional IRA or SEP IRA or simple IRA or 403b. Any retirement account plan that you put money in that you don't pay tax on when you put it in. You don't pay tax when you put it in, so you save tax now only to let that retirement account grow. And then at some point down the road, you're going to pay tax down the road. And required minimum distributions is the government's way of forcing you at 73 years old to take money out of that retirement account if you haven't already, or if you still have money in your retirement account, because they've been delaying allowing you to pay taxes, or you've been delaying paying taxes all these years. So now they want their taxes. So they're not going to let you leave it there forever. So the key with a pre-tax retirement account is you put the money in, you save taxes now, you're going to pay tax later. When you put money into a Roth IRA or Roth 401k, that's post-tax money. You pay tax on the amount that you put in, but now that amount's going to grow tax-free forever. So you're not saving tax when you put it in. You're going to pay tax on the amount that you put in, but you are going to grow your portfolio tax-free. Well, so the question is always, what makes the most sense? And certainly from a general standpoint, tax-free is going to be better than taxable, but there's going to be exceptions. What are some of the exceptions? Well, I find that most of my clients that have a 50-50 portfolio are the clients that are in the best position to control their tax brackets. If you have some money that you're going to have to withdraw that is pre-tax, you've never paid tax on, then you can take that income and you can take out of that account until you get up to the top of the next bracket. Right now, you can make $106,000 of adjusted gross income and never leave the 12% tax bracket if you're married filing joint. That's a good amount of money, $106,000. So if you're making $50,000 or $60,000 of Social Security and pension, or $70,000, you could take $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year out of your pre-tax account and never leave the 12% tax bracket. And if you're in the state of California, you throw in another few percent, so you're at 15, 16% tax on that money. So if you have some pre-tax money, you can fill up that bucket. You can go to the top of the next bucket and never leave the tax bracket. But what if you need more than $106,000? What if you need $150,000 to live? Well, if all your money is pre-tax, well, now all of a sudden the next tax bracket above 12% is 22%. So now if you need to take out $30,000 or $40,000 above the 106, you need to take out, $150,000. That's $44,000 more. Then now you're going to be paying 22% on that amount of money, and that can really hurt. So if you have some pre-tax money and you have some money that you've already paid taxes on that is tax-free, you can use this pre-tax money to take you to the top of your current tax bracket, and now you can use this tax-free money to take you over that. And because it's tax-free, it won't push you into another tax bracket. So the reality is tax-free is better than pre-tax, but it doesn't mean you need to convert everything from pre-tax to Roth IRA, or it doesn't mean you need to contribute everything to Roth IRA, because it does give you some control to be able to control your tax brackets down the road. So that's important to understand. Now, if we're talking about contributions, when you contribute to a pre-tax account, we already talked about you save tax on the contribution. But when it comes to a Roth IRA and you make a contribution to the Roth IRA, you pay tax on it now, but it grows tax-free. So what if you find yourself having a pre-tax account, as a lot of you do, and you now that you're learning about Roth IRAs tax-free, you're like, man, I wish I would have done that. How come they didn't have that when I was working? Well, the fact is that good news for you is you can do conversions. You can convert from a pre-tax account to a Roth account. You're going to pay the tax now, but then it's going to grow tax-free forever. So what you're really talking about is a short-term pain, a short-term planning strategy for a long-term gain. And if you're invested for income, like we talk about, you might even be able to get the income from your portfolio to pay for the tax that it's going to cost you to convert. So the answer is, it's a great time to convert while taxes are low, because when you make the conversion, we're in a lower tax society now for 2023, 2024, and all of 2025. We have 3 years that if you want to convert $100,000, you could do $33,000 a year and spread it out over 3 years before the Trump tax brackets fall. So to answer your question, yes, great. Long answer, but I think some of you needed a refresher. Maybe this is the first time you're learning about the difference between IRA and Roth IRAs, and the fact that you could actually convert. I think that's pretty important as well, too. So hopefully that answers your question. Let's move on. I feel like I'm a little bit behind. Where are we at? 7:10. We're okay. I think we're probably focused on being done here about 7:30. So let's answer the question about Bidenomics. The question is, what effect will Bidenomics have on withdrawing money from our portfolio? So Bidenomics really focuses on green energy. It focuses on government spending. It focuses on a lot of social things. Even if we think about ESG investing, even though it's been around for a while, I think we could probably attribute research in ESG investing to Bidenomics. And there's a lot of things that Bidenomics comes into play. But I think when it comes to Bidenomics, the number one thing that's going to affect your future investments is going to be taxes. We just spent a long time talking about taxes. If your money is tax-free, by the way, if it's Roth IRA and it's tax-free money, do you care how much taxes go up? Doesn't bother you. That's kind of cool. So that's another reason why it makes sense. But when we think about taxes, so taxes are something that absolutely are going to impact your portfolio, impact your buying power. So is inflation. So those are all things that, as you're invested for income, like, we have you here at Providence Financial, we want to keep in the back of our minds as well, too. So Bidenomics itself, I don't think is going to have a direct impact on the liquidity of your portfolio and whether you can get your income. But the tax portion of it, certainly something we have to keep in mind. And, we've had conversations with many of you about doing some of these conversions for the purpose of, when taxes go up, being able to have some tax-free money so you can control your taxes. That's the reason why we've had this conversation with some of you. So if you have an IRA and you haven't done any conversions, or we haven't had the conversation, feel free to reach out to us as a result of this. And you can have a conversation with me. You can have a conversation with Juan. We'll see if doing that, it makes sense for you as well, too. So next question. Can you tell us, Anthony, your views on how one can best plan to buy a home in the next year? Does one wait? If so, how long? So now we're pulling out our crystal ball, right? This is just, in some regards, speculation, because no one knows. I actually thought 3 years ago that the housing market was going to crash. I was wrong. A lot of people thought that. A lot of people were wrong. But the reality is we don't know. But here's what we know. Housing prices dipped for a little while, and now they've kind of crept up even recently. And with a 7% mortgage, it's just hard to believe that people are still out there and the demand is so high. But the reason that the demand is so high has to do with the fact that the supply is so low. A lot of you have mortgages that you're paying 3% on, right? 3.25%, 3.5%. And you're not about to move and give that up to go buy another place with a 7% mortgage. So it's the demand, the supply of homes is just not there. The demand has really stayed the same. It's not really that the demand has grown, but it's stayed the same, but the supply has gone down. It's a simple supply demand equation. So is that going to change? I think it will at some point. The Federal Reserve is indicating that they're going to continue to raise rates, continue to combat inflation. Inflation now is as low as it's been since, I think it was May of 21, 22. But the fact is that they're, it's not where they want it to be. They have a 2% target. It's not there. They're going to keep raising rates. At some point, I think it's going to break. I think the labor market's got potential to break, and I think the housing market has potential to break too. I still wouldn't be surprised to see 10 or 20% correction in home prices. I actually would have thought we would have seen it by now, but we haven't. And I read some stats earlier to you about the inverted yield curve. And sometimes the yield curve is inverted for 2 years before a recession starts. So I don't think we're years away from this happening. I feel like we're almost on a precipice. Is it possible that we get through this whole time period and we really don't have any correction or any crap? That's possible too. So we don't know. If that happens, rates are going to stay at this level for a while. And if that happens, then it's a good time to buy a home. If that doesn't happen, and we do get into a recession, then in fact, home prices will drop as well too. I think you'll get between 10 and 20% discount. If it were my money, I would wait. I would wait another 6 months, a year and a half, see what happens. And my gut feel says that there's got to be a better time to buy a home. We don't know for sure, but that's my gut feel. So great question. Hopefully that helps. I'd love to be able to, give you a definitive black and white. There is just no definitive black and white. It's one of those things you can't know. But what else? Will digital currency be imposed? And if so, how will it affect investment accounts? So digital currency, it's already here. And it's interesting. They have this, they're talking about Fed coin and Fed now. And I don't want to spend too much time because there's a few more questions that I want to delve deeper into. But Fed coin is the digital currency that we're talking about. But think about this. When you go to the grocery store, are you handing them cash or are you using your card? When you buy something from a vending machine, are you using cash or do you put your Apple phone up to the vending machine and now it just debits from your phone? We are already in a digital currency society. It's no different. It really isn't. At some point in time, do I think cash is going to go away? Yes. I did an interview on one of the major networks, Fox or something. I don't remember. I think it was Fox probably 5 or 6 years ago. And in that interview, I remember saying, in the next decade, I think we're going to be cashless. Now we're 5 years down the road. We're not cashless yet, but we're headed that way. How's that going to affect anything? I don't think it's going to affect anything at all. We're already there. When you look at the money supply, they categorize money supply as M0, M1, M2, M3. And, M0 is all the Federal Reserve money, and that's it. And then you move down to M1, M2, M3. M3 is large time deposits, big CDs, money market accounts, corporate, commercial bank accounts. And if you take a look at the money supply that's out there, there is only a fraction of the money supply that is actually available in paper form. If everybody went to all the banks to cash out all their money, the money doesn't exist. The money is only existing in digital format right now. So everyone's making a big deal about this. And actually, I don't want to say everyone. The people in the know, I think, aren't making a big deal about this. The media is making a big deal about this whenever the news story comes out. But I don't think it's really a big deal. And no, it's not going to affect your investments, whether it's digital or not. I would argue that we're already there. We're already in the digital age as well. And so I think that's just important to understand. So great question. I wouldn't be something I would be concerned with. FedNow is a payment processing system. We'll touch on that. It's a payment processing system that is supposed to just make things faster. Right now when you pay with a debit card, it takes a day or two to come out of your account. Well, the FedNow is when you pay with the debit card, it's supposed to come out of your account like right now. Everything's instantaneous. That's what's supposed to happen. And that was supposed to go in effect in July. Has it gone into effect? I actually don't know, but I don't think it's going to be a big issue. I do remember this about 10 or 12 years ago. I remember the same type of thing. It used to take even longer. It used to take 2 or 3 days for money to transfer out of accounts. And then they had this act or like what they're calling FedNow to make it faster. They had something else back then. I don't remember what it was, but they had something else back then. And now they said, well, now everything's going to come out of your account in one day. And that's almost what happens, like 1, maybe 2 days now. It speeded everything up by a day. They did that then. It was big news back then. It depending on the day you watch TV, we've heard some interviews about this, but it's not going to be a big deal at the end of the day. Fed now, and it's supposed to have gone into force. I'm not even sure that it has. So, but either way, it's not going to affect anything we do. Not going to affect your investments at all. So moving on, question number 8. We got 2 questions left. In this one, I got to take a few minutes and talk about this. This really hits the core of what we do. And this question came in like multiple paragraphs, so I'm kind of going to convolute it. I'm going to synthesize it. Here you go. Can you please talk about dividends? How do dividends build wealth? Or how do dividends build your wealth by investing them back? How do dividends help us whether the stock market is doing well or not? So apparently, we want to know how dividends help you build wealth, and we asked the question 5 different ways. So in order to do that, we have to talk about dollar cost averaging. This is going to come into play later. You might be saying, well, dollar cost averaging, what's that got to do with dividends building wealth? Well, everything. And if you don't understand the dollar cost averaging concept, then you don't understand how dividends are going to be used to build wealth. So what's dollar cost averaging? Dollar cost averaging, DCA, is when you buy the same investment over and over and over and over again, regardless of the price of the investment. Right? So for those of you that have had retirement accounts, every paycheck money comes out of your paycheck, it goes into your retirement account, and it buys the mutual fund. Same mutual fund or same set of mutual funds over and over and over and over. It's dollar cost averaging. That's the definition of dollar cost averaging. And mathematically, what it does is it drives the average purchase price down. Why? Because the way you make money in the market is to what? To buy low. And that's what it does. Mathematically, it drives the average purchase price down. Think about it this way. Let's imagine for a second that you had $10 come out of your paycheck and you bought a mutual fund for $10. I'm sorry, let me back up. Give you an example that makes sense. Let's say you were investing $100 out of your paycheck, every paycheck, into this mutual fund. And this paycheck, you invest $100 and the mutual fund is $10 a share. How many shares you get? 10. Okay. Now, next paycheck, you invest another $100, but this time the mutual fund had a bad 2 weeks and it got cut in half. Now it's only $5 a share. How many shares you get? 20. Right. What was the average cost per share? Now, I know a lot of you said $7.50 because that's the answer I've been getting for a decade since I've been using this conversation, this analogy. $7.50. That's the most common answer. Very rarely does anyone get this right, but the answer is $6.67. Why? Because you've invested $100 the first time, you got 10 shares, $10 a share. The second time you invested $100, but they were $5 a share, you get 20 shares. So 10 and 20 shares, you got 30 shares for $200. You do the math, you divide 200 by 30 shares, and it comes out to $6.67. By investing over and over and over again, what'd you do? You drove the average purchase price down. Okay. So it's important to understand that that's what dollar cost averaging does. Okay. Now, let's talk just briefly about market history. Okay? We have to, because it all comes into play in answering this question. Well, how do dividends help build wealth? Well, for those of you that have known me for a long time, you know that we study market history a lot at our firm. And I wrote about it in my book, More Life Than Money, which, by the way, has recently become an Amazon #1 bestseller again. It hit Amazon #1 bestseller in multiple categories a while ago. And I just got notified, I think 2 weeks ago, that it climbed up in a couple more categories. But the reality is I talk about market history in the book. But here's what you need to know about the market. When you look at 200 years of history of the market, there are long periods of time where the market just goes up and down and up and down, but at the end of the day, no growth. And then there are long periods of time where the market will have great growth. And when I say long periods of time, I'm talking 10 to 20 years. 10 to 20 years of no growth, followed by 10 to 20 years of great growth. Well, if you go back to the turn of the century, we're going back 23 years. If you look at 2000, and if you were to chart out from 2000 to 2013, 13 years, it looks like a big W. You've got one V, That was the 2001 crash and recovery. And then you've got another V, and that was the 2008 crash and recovery. But you've got a W from 2000 to 2013, 13 years of two major crashes, two recoveries, but no growth in the market for 13 years. Well, then if you go back now, the last 13 years, the market has done 15% plus a year for the last 13 years, 15% plus. So that's a typical good years, decades, followed by bad decades, good period, bad periods of time, good periods of time. That's the way that the market flows. It's the ebb and flow of the market. So knowing, just without knowing anything else, if we had a good 13-year period from 2000 to 2013, and now from 2009 to 2023, you know what? Let me back up. I'm sorry, did it wrong. Back up. Let's go back. If we had a bad period, knowing nothing else, if we had a bad period, a flat period from 2000 to 2013, no growth, followed by the last 13 years of great growth, what does history tell us is likely to happen next? Probably another flat period for maybe a decade or so. That's what history tells us. And if you pay attention to the news out there, that's a lot of experts are saying that. Bank of America just came out and basically said that they think the next decade is going to be flat or maybe slightly negative. Well, history agrees with that. So now all of a sudden, when you put the recession on the horizon and you put the inverted yield curve there, it kind of all makes sense, right? It kind of points to that. The fact that we have high inflation, the fact that everything's softening. So when this softens, could we have another 2001 or could we have another 2008? We could. And I just don't want you to get caught up in that. But if we do, if the next decade looks like the first decade of this century, where we just have crash and recovery, but maybe a decade and a half of no growth, then how is that going to affect you? How is that going to affect your portfolio? Well, we've got to talk about old money, new money. And hang with me. I almost wish I had some slides to do this, but let's see if I can verbalize this and get this all to make sense for you. We got to talk about old money, new money. What's old money? Old money is the money you have. New money is the money you're putting in. Now, for those of you that are retired, you have a new money, right? You're not putting in, you're retired, you're living off your old money, or you're just letting your old money sit there. But let's say that you're still working, you're pre-retirement, you're working, and you're still dollar cost averaging. You still have money coming out of your check. Well, if we have a crash, okay, if the market does go down 20 or 30 or 40% from here, if we have a crash and you're putting money in, you're buying shares, paycheck after paycheck after paycheck after paycheck, does a crash hurt you or help you with regards to your new money? Let me help you if you didn't get it right. And that is, it helps you. Why? Because you want to buy low. If the market crashes, if the market goes down, you're investing the same amount over and over again. You get to buy more shares for your dollar, right? If it goes down more, you get to buy more shares for your dollar. If it goes down more, you get to buy more shares for your dollar. If the market crashes by 50% like it did in 2001 or 60% like it did in 2008, you get the 2-for-1 deal. You get to buy twice as many shares if the market is half off because it's 50% lower. So if you get to buy more shares, does a crashing market hurt you or help you when you're investing new money? Answer, it helps you. Remember that. Helps you. Crashing market helps you. What about the old money? I don't know. Let's say you have $1 million in your retirement account and it's there invested in a mutual fund and it's a growth fund. It's just there, just investing, right? Just sitting there. Well, if the market crashes 50% and your $1 million drops to 50%, that drops to $500,000, you're sweating it. But did that help you or did that hurt you? It hurt you. Why? Because it's old money. It didn't help you. So if we have 13 years of new money where you're dollar cost averaging and the market crashes and recovers and crashes and recovers, that whole time period helps you with regard to new money because you're dollar cost averaging and you're buying every time the market crashes. But with your old money, what's happening? Your money crashed, it came back, it crashed, it came back. It goes on this roller coaster ride, but 13 years later, your $1 million is still worth $1 million. Your old money is still worth the same in 13 years as it was 13 years earlier because the market just crashed and recovered twice. So with old money, a long period of time like that hurts you. Why? Because there's opportunity cost. You could have invested something that was paying you a little more back then and at least earned 3, 4, 5% interest for 13 years, right? Let's not forget about inflation. 13 years later, things don't cost what they did 13 years ago. So if you had $1 million in the year 2000 and you had $1 million in 2013, well, that $1 million in 2013 won't buy you the same thing that it did in 2000. So the fact is that it hurts you with regards to the old money. It hurts you this 13-year flat period, but it helps you with the new money. So if you're dollar cost averaging, don't change a thing. I talk about this on the interviews. I get this question all the time. What's someone supposed to do if we're going to have a recession? The answer is, are we talking old money or new money? New money, don't change a thing. Keep dollar cost averaging. A recession is going to help you. Old money, here's the difference. Old money, if you're invested for growth, then it's going to hurt you. But what if you're invested for dividends? Now, all of a sudden, if you have $1 million and you're just getting 3% dividends, that's $30,000 a year. $30,000 a year of dividends on $1 million. If you're not spending it, what do you think we're going to do with it? Yeah, we're going to dollar cost average it back in. What did we say? If the market crashes and you have $30,000 of dividends and the market crashes, and now all of a sudden we're just investing over and over again, we're dollar cost averaging because you have the dividends. Does it crash and the market hurt you, or does it now help you? And it helps you. It's huge. The dividends are what helps you. It might be the only thing that helps you if we have another W-type period. If we have another 13 years of crashes and recoveries where the market just washes each other out, that 3% dividend might be your saving grace. Someone said the other day that you're getting paid to wait. I think that's a great way of looking at it. You're getting paid to wait. So if we're wrong and we don't have another decade or decade and a half of this flat time period, well, if you're in dividend producing stock and the market goes through the roof, guess what? You still have stock, you still make money. But if we're right, then at least you get paid to wait. So when you're dollar cost averaging your dividends in, it causes you to be able to grow your portfolio faster because of that compounding effect of the dollar cost averaging. Let me give you some numbers. I actually need to look. I did some research on this, and I've talked. Some of you have probably heard these numbers before, but maybe not. If we go back to 1982, and you look at the S&P 500, and you break out, so we're going back, 40 years, and you break out the dividend payers from the non-dividend payers, right? And you would have invested $100,000 in the S&P 500, not counting dividends. Your $100,000 today would be worth 40 years later, $1.7 million. Sounds good, right? Until you realize that when you throw in the dividends, your $100,000 would be worth $5.4 million today. $5.4 million. Now the dividend, it's only 1.4% on the S&P 500. It's usually less than 1.5%. So how is it that 1.5% causes you to threefold your portfolio over the same 40-year time period? It's because of the compounding effect of dollar cost averaging and reinvesting the dividends. The difference between your 100,000 growing into 1.7 million or $5.4 million. Significant. Let's give you one more example. Let's go back 50 years. And let's take the S&P 500 again, 500 biggest companies in the world, right? Most reliable index that most economists look at, S&P 500. And let's once again separate the dividend payers from the non-dividend payers. And let's look at the performance over the last 50 years. The non-dividend payers have averaged 8.4% over the last 50 years. The dividend payers, 12.9%. 12.9%. 50% more in total return because of the dividends. And here's the kicker. The kicker is they did it with less risk. They did it with less risk. There was less volatility with that group of stocks than there was with the non-dividend payers. So when it comes to reinvesting dividends, you have to have something to reinvest. If the market is flat for the next 13 years, and you have old money that's not giving you any dividends, you're just going to go along for the roller coaster ride and come out with nothing at the end. But if you're receiving dividends, then in fact, you're going to come out with smelling like a rose, because now you've gotten paid to wait and you're dollar cost averaging along the way. That's huge. If you're getting $30,000 a year of dividends on your $1 million and the market crashes by half, you get twice as many shares. So when the market recovers, you come out smelling like a rose. That compounding effect has a huge impact on growing your portfolio. So hopefully that answers the question to some degree. Now, in closing, we're at the hour mark. I think we'll be just maybe 5 more minutes because I do want to give a couple of closing things and kind of even wrap this up, because some of you, and you know who you are, have gotten impatient. We have gotten some calls, not a lot, but some people are looking at the stock market and looking at the fact that it's done really well this last year, forgetting that it dropped by 40% just 2 years ago. But they're looking at it and the grass is greener. And, here we are with fixed income over the last couple of years, portfolios are down. And so they're looking at it and the grass is greener. And we have had some calls but very, very few. But some of you might be thinking that. Well, the challenge is that, and we've seen this happen. I was in business before the 2001 crash. I saw that. I lived through the 2001 crash. I helped people through it. I helped people through the 2008 financial crash. And there are always people that think it's better on the other side. And in 2007, if they thought it was better, and then they jumped ship and decided to put their money in the stock market, the reality is that now they lost their shirt, 60% of their portfolio. And I can't tell you how many, those people, sometimes, some of them had enough guts in 2008 to come back and go, I messed up. And hopefully it didn't cost them their retirement. And who knows? Do we have another situation like that? I don't know. Is the market going to go straight up for the next 10 years? Probably not, but we don't know. But here's the question. Can you afford to take the risk? That's the question. Can you afford to lose 50% of your portfolio? Because if the answer is no, it does not matter what the stock market does. You can't afford to invest in the stock market because the stock market can lose 50% at any point in time. And if you can't afford to take the risk, that's not the place that you should be. And I think it's just important to understand. But when it comes to fixed income investing, a lot of you are getting between 5 and 6% on your portfolio in the form of income. So, and you've noticed that your portfolios are down. They've been down for a couple of years. Well, a couple of years ago, I said something, I think on a video like this, but I said something, and I said it multiple times. I said it on, I think, YouTube videos. I think I said it on my podcast. I think I said it on my radio show, something that we talked about. And what I said is this, and that is, I hope that fixed income portfolios stay down for a while. Why? Because for those of you that are getting your income hasn't changed because you're living off interest and dividends. And if you know how income works, your income stays the same. Even if your portfolio goes down in value, it's just a fluctuation. It doesn't affect your income. So if you're living on your income and the portfolio goes down, no harm, no foul. But if you're reinvesting your income and the portfolio goes down in value, why did it go down in value? Because all the investments went down in value. And because it went down in value, now you've got your dividends, you're getting 5-6%. What are we doing? We're reinvesting. And once again, let me ask you, you want to reinvest when we're low, when the price of your investments is higher, when the price of your investments is low? Low. Why? It's dollar cost averaging. It's everything we talked up to this point. Dollar cost averaging. I said a couple of years ago, and I didn't think a couple of years ago it was going to stay down for a couple of years. I could still see another year of it being down, but we don't know. But the fact is, I hope it stays down for a while, because for those of you that are dollar cost averaging, you're buying more shares. You don't see it behind the scenes. Your portfolio is staying level. But when the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, what I expect to see is a pop in your portfolios. And I could see between 10 and 20% in 1 year, your portfolio just springboarding back to the levels that you were used to before they started raising interest rates. And I can see that happening. Now, if you're reinvesting, that means the price went up. If it goes up, is that going to hurt you, help you, or hurt you if you're reinvesting? It's going to hurt you. The fact that the prices are down, enjoy it. Don't look at the grass greener. You are now right where you need to be. If you can't afford to take a 50% loss, then you can't be in the stock market. So the reality is that we are just dollar cost averaging. Keep dollar cost averaging at some point at a pop. It won't be in your best interest for it to pop if you're reinvesting, but you'll feel better. But that's what I would expect to happen. Now, Warren Buffett has talked about patience. And I did a radio show or podcast, I don't remember which, a few months ago on patience. I think it is the number one most important trait that is going to dictate how successful your future is in retirement. Patience. Warren Buffett has said that if you can't own a stock for 10 years, you shouldn't own it for 10 minutes. For 10 minutes. So, AKA, he thinks that 10 years is the amount of time that you need to own an investment for in order to be able to own the investment at all. Patience. You don't know what's going to happen in the short run. You just don't know. You can't predict what's going to happen in the short run. You know, when you hired us, you didn't ask me to invest for the next year or two. Not one of you. What you asked me to do is to help you for the rest of your lives. And it's funny once in a while. And again, most of you guys are great. But you know, maybe some of you might be thinking this and have just not voiced it. But there are some people that, you know, became a client a year or two ago, or maybe 5 years ago. And, you know, and they're like, well, it just seems like, and you know, they're not quite, they're being impatient. You know, and if you became, we literally, I just remember this 2 years ago, an individual became a client and he called me the next day and said, hey, my account went up a little bit. The next day, I'm like, no, we got to have this conversation now. We're not investing you for 1 year, for 2 years, for 3 years. It feels like you're in the desert when that's happening. But if you're reinvesting, it's actually extremely beneficial for you. I don't mind that we stay at this level for a while. If you're getting your income, it doesn't hurt you at all. You're going to keep getting your income. So I think it's important to understand that patience is a virtue, and patience is probably the most important virtue when it comes to investing. And Warren Buffett thinks that 10 years is the time that you need to be patient for. 10 years. Warren Buffett also said something else that I think is smart. And he said the stock market is a mechanism for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient. And that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. If you think that the grass is greener, again, I've lived through people thinking the grass is greener in 2001, 2008. Who knows what's going to happen if you cannot afford a 50% loss? Take your 5 or 6%. Make sure that you can retire make sure that you can retire no matter what. I do not want your retirement to be dependent on whether things go well. If you can afford to take some risk and have some money in stocks and still retire, great. Talk with me about that. We have a lot of you in that position. We have a lot of you in stocks that can afford to take that risk. But if you can't afford the risk of a 50% loss, and if the major recession or correction or crash or whatever you want to call it's going to affect your retirement, you cannot afford that risk. Don't even think about doing it. So just word to the wise, if you will. I think that is it. Our last question we actually covered. I don't think there's anything that we missed. These are great questions. We are going to continue to do this quarterly. And we really appreciate your questions. If you don't ask these questions, I don't have anything to talk about. So next quarter, please continue to send us your questions about what's going on. And I'll do some research and answer your questions just like I did here. So certainly hope that this has been valuable for you. 2 more quick things. First of all, if you haven't got a copy of my book yet, More Life Than Money, you absolutely should get it. I talk about the things that can wreck your retirement. And there's 10 things in there that you may not know that can wreck your retirement. And you can go to Amazon and buy it for $24.95. And that's one thing. And read it. If there's anything in there we haven't talked about, just let me know. That's the first thing. The second thing is we are doing a referral dinner seminar on September 24th. This is something that we used to do a long time ago. It's been probably 6 or 8 years since we've actually done one, but it's a referral event. What the referral event, what it's going to do is for those of you that want to refer us to someone, but maybe a little bit uncomfortable. I mean, when you refer someone, there's a risk, right? There's a risk that they won't like us. There's a risk we're going to bug the daylights out of them. And, you know, they're going to call you and go, how come you referred me? You know that. There's that. So we want to be cognizant of that. And of course, we're not going to bug the daylights out of anybody. But what we have found is, you know, we do a lot of referral. I think 53% of our business last year was a combination of referrals and people adding more money to their accounts. And that's because we don't blow smoke. You know me, I'm a straight shooter. And that's because of that. So what we're doing, again, is we're having a dinner seminar on September 24th. in which you, our client, can bring a guest or two who you think we can help. This is not designed for you to bring your broke kid. It's not designed for you to grab a friend, your neighbor who we did. This is designed as a referral event for people that are like you, for people who think that you think that might be able to benefit from what we talk about, benefit from income. And so the way that it works is we're going to wind up, we'll have it at a Ruth's Chris steakhouse or a nice upper end steakhouse somewhere. There'll generally be about 6 couples, 6 to 8 couples. Everyone brings guests, so it's probably 25 or 30 people. That's usually what winds up happening. I'm going to speak for probably 30 to 45 minutes. We'll keep it short. I'm going to talk about current events, so I'm not going to be scripted. I'm just going to come and maybe answer questions from the people that come there, and some of this conversation maybe regurgitate some of it. But we're going to talk. And the bottom line is it's a great way for you to bring your friends to us. If that is something that you want to attend, we're taking in names now so that we can call you and talk about that. So we have a process in place. If you are interested, email us at info@providencefinancialinc.com. It's info@providencefinancialinc.com. Just let us know you're interested and we'll call you. We'll let you know the process. There is a limited number, but depending on how many people call, we'll just add more. But let us know if that's something that you're interested in. So I hope this has helped. I hope you learned something that you didn't know. My goal is to help make your retirement stress-free as much as I can. Get a copy of my book, Amazon.com, More Life Than Money. And if you have any questions about anything we talked about, feel free to email me, email Twan, email someone. We'll get those questions answered. But I hope this has helped. Have a great evening, everyone. God bless.